Welcome to another new episode of Strange Encounters, where we take a deep dive into the mysterious and unexplained world of alien and UFO encounters. Get ready to listen to some astonishing and allegedly true stories of encounters with the unknown. That's right, it's not all swamp gas and weather balloons out there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and hit the notification bell and send your unexplained and strange encounters to verystrangeencounters@gmail.com. You can now submit your stories online to the website linked below the video. Join us on Reddit at r/verystrangeencounters. You can donate to the channel at Patreon or buymeacoffee.com, which are also linked below. So, sit back, relax, and prepare to be amazed and astonished by the mysteries of the universe as we listen to these allegedly true alien encounter stories on this episode of Strange Encounters. 3 Different Experiences by Core Samples. These are the 3 sightings I've had, each in different places, different crafts, and years apart. In 2009, I went backpacking in Alaska on a student trip. We were coming off of a glacier and hiking out of a riverbed. 4 of us sat by the fire one night and noticed 3 lights moving above a mountain in the distance. There was also a cloud above the mountain, and it seemed like they were moving between them. Mining, cloaked mothership. We all watched silently for about 15 minutes. When it stopped and weather came in, we had a near-silent understanding of what had happened and went to bed. We didn't talk about it. In 2016, I was camping again in Maine with 3 different people. We were around the fire chatting when my friend pointed up behind us at a light that had focused itself onto us. We were in its beam. It seemed like when we noticed it that it cut the light, though visibly flew as if magnetized to the position of a star in the sky as if to camouflage itself. I could then make out a small orb sent out to its left, maybe as a proxy. We also went straight to bed and did not talk about it. Silent understanding. Then last year, 2022, also camping but on an island in a different part of Maine, I felt really odd. My partner left camp to make a grocery run for about 40 minutes. I took the kayak out and floated around. When I pulled back to the beach, I could see a sort of rosy vortex in the sky. It was like watching a firework made of fabric in reverse, like it folded into itself. Not a minute later, I saw military jets fly right through where it curled away into the sky. Being alone for that one was a trip. Anyway, thanks for listening. I think it's likely that Sighting 2 was human military based on where we were and how it behaved. I've always thought that Sighting 1 was them mining the mountain and depositing to a ship in the cloud. It's weird. I don't like talking about it, but it's always been such a frightening and consistent part of my life. I don't think I've been abducted, but here's hoping. I Think I Had a UFO Sighting by Captain Boracua. Before I stopped working at Walmart, I was working the 5 a.m. shift. I'd leave the house when it was still dark. I loved the drive because the streets were clear, the air was cool, and the skies on a good day were very clear. On this particular morning, I hit the highway that went to work, and the sky was unusually clear. I mean, it was like I could see every star in the sky. It was honestly fascinating. As I'm getting to the Walmart, I see these 3 bright lights quite a ways in the sky. Now, I will try to explain this as best I can. When you are sitting and driving, you see what is directly in front of you, and for the most part, you can't look straight above you. So these lights were difficult to gauge how far they are. But what I remember is how yellow these lights were. It wasn't like regular white light, it was a very luminous yellow. Now, for the past year, I rationalized it as this. I live near a military facility. Maybe they were doing early morning drills. The lights were signal flares. That would explain how bright they were. The alternative is that they were helicopters. Why neither rationalization makes sense is the way they moved. You see, I'm not aware of any flare that drops suddenly, then in an instant shoots back up into the air at incredible speeds. Then there is the question of the size. I know flares are bright, and I am aware that light works funny when it comes to perspective, but they were far too big to be signal flares. Now, I'm not saying they were huge, but they were of a decent size. Now, for the helicopter theory, so this military installation does house choppers. We see them all the time buzzing around the skies of the neighborhood during the day. This was my first issue with them. In the year I worked that shift, I'd never seen the helicopters fly that early. So to explain this, I said maybe it's a random training exercise. But for me, this is the issue. Why would they do such crazy maneuvers so close to a residential area? I mean, the way they moved was insane. For the few minutes I observed them, they would coast around for a little, then drop out of sight, only to shoot back up and out of view at insane speeds, just to drop back down and hover in place. It was like they were dancing around each other. I didn't want to write about this because I thought it was silly, and people would just tell me those were the helicopters. And maybe they were. But if there was a place to write about it, I figured it would be here. What prompted me to write about it was that new movie, Nope. My brother and I went to go see it, and the movie just bothered me. It's like it just had me thinking more and more about what I saw that night. What irritates me the most is I didn't film it. I was so entranced by the lights, the way they moved, the early morning sky, that I just didn't. But yeah, that's my story. Today is the day I lay out my 2 UFO experiences by Scuba Steve. Hey, I'm a firm believer, but I just observe these things as objects of science rather than aliens or ETs. The craft they utilize is what interests me. With that being said, I believe in supernatural, paranormal, and all that stuff, but also ask that you don't lay into me too hard. I wanted to share these stories, and if you guys aren't mean, I'll mess around with that iPhone 6S and see if I can recover that video I recorded. The first one happened to me in San Quentin, Mexico. I was small, probably around 5 or 6 years old, and due to me being a pain, I was sent to bed early, causing me to wake up at the early hours of the morning. It was 2 a.m., then for some reason, I was compelled to look out the window. It was then I saw a very large, elongated, tic-tac shape with an iridescence mixed with the interpretation of cosmic background radiation that came burning into the atmosphere in a sharp vertical line. My limited understanding of science at the time assured me that I was a goner until it was that the craft shifted from a vertical approach to a swift upwards curve out of the atmosphere. This whole interchange took like 10 seconds maybe. Afterwards, I ran to wake up my mother to show her the ships, but there were none. The last one was in 2016, San Clemente, California, when I was working at Albertsons as an early morning stalker. I woke and got ready for work the same as any day. Then a white, bright ball of light, about the size of a small star, but very close, was just hovering in the sky. I stared at it for a while, thinking that's oddly bright and small for the moon, huh? Then I looked over and saw the moon. It then occurred to me that perhaps I'm observing something strange. I bust out my iPhone 6X and start recording the star. It generated a literal cloud, like a video game. It came around the right side of the sphere and snaked its way around the sphere until it was a bright, glowing cloud. At this point, I was starting to get late to work, so I just headed out. More recently, I did see a craft of a similar build operating over the ocean like 3 months back, maybe. I may have just seen a Shapeshifter by Starless Eon. I don't know if this is the right place for this, And to be honest, I don't really buy into the alien reptilian shapeshifter thing, but I need to record this somewhere. I was walking to work at 8 a.m. this morning in a busy city. The temperature was 6 degrees Celsius, 42 degrees Fahrenheit, so it was cold. I had been awake over an hour at this time, so wide awake, and was listening to music on YouTube as I walked. Coming towards me down the street, I saw a man in shorts, short sleeves, and thongs walking down the street. I glanced at his face and saw that it was really vague or nondescript, almost featureless. At first, I thought they were wearing a stocking over their head, and I was trying to think of a reason they'd be doing that. But then I realized this person just had extremely vague features, like just a smooth surface where the face should have been. They had bright blue eyes and a lump where their nose should have been, and otherwise their face was formless. They had no hair on their head and no facial hair. As I got closer, their face got more definition, like it was loading in. And by the time they were next to me, I could see their face more clearly. Still a fairly nondescript face, but now I could see a more human nose, cheeks, etc. I have pretty good vision. I can make out people's features from across the street fairly well. This person had almost no face when I first saw them at that distance. It looked like they were wearing a stocking over their face. Not sure if this was a reptilian shapeshifter, and I may simply have been mistaken, but a lot about this person was extremely odd to me. Only My Father Believes Me by Coase 4810. When I was younger, around 10 years old, my family all went camping at this campground in Worcester Township, Maryland. We would always go to this campground and would get the same site that was in this open area that hardly had any trees, but rested on a bay on the inside shore of Maryland. Anyway, one evening my dad and I were outside of our RV setting up outdoor furniture. I specifically remember how clear that night was and how there were 0 clouds in the sky, so you could see a decent amount of stars. While we were looking up at the sky, we see this red light that looks almost like an orb appear above the bay. At first, we thought it was a flare because that's seemingly what it looked like. However, there was no arc to it, just a red dot that didn't move. After around a few dozen seconds, the one red light turned into 2, and then eventually 3, all in the shape of a triangle. My father and I just sat there and watched as these 3 red dots then started to move in a direction from the bay towards the campground where we were. The triangle didn't exactly move fast, but it didn't exactly move slow. The triangle was over top of us and the campground and just sat there for a few seconds until all 3 red lights went out simultaneously, like someone turned off a light switch. After the lights went out, I ran inside to my grandparents' RV, where I found my mom, brothers, and grandparents all playing a card game. When I told them what my father and I saw outside and how it had to be a UFO, they all gave me weird looks as if I was crazy. After going back outside to find my father, I found him talking to one of the security guards that was driving around to sites to check on people due to others seeing mysterious lights in the sky. It's one of the weirdest things that I have ever encountered, and I was wondering if anybody had similar stories. It certainly made me believe more in aliens. Missing Items by Fiona Harris. I'm sure I'm not the only experiencer who has had items taken during abductions. When I was 4, my aunt went on a trip to Germany and brought me back 2 sets of small rubber dolls. There were 5 or 6 dolls in each set, so I had either 10 or 12 dolls. When I went to bed that night, I tucked all of them in beside me under the covers. The next morning when I woke up, all of them were gone and were never seen again. Nobody knew that I had taken them to bed with me. It would have been difficult for anyone to come downstairs to my dark bedroom sneak into bed with me, and retrieve all 10 or 12 of those dolls. As a preteen, I had a book that I really loved. It disappeared from beside my bed. I'd been reading it before I went to sleep. Never saw it again. In my early 20s, I had a habit of taking my clothes off at night and leaving them on the floor at the foot of my bed. I wore a lot of vintage clothing at the time and had a handmade bra from the 1920s. I also had a really beautiful purple cotton dress from the 1960s. I happened to wear both one day. The next morning, they were missing from the foot of the bed. Again, I never saw them again. A really weird one. About 7 years ago, I spent the night at a friend's house. When I came home the next morning, there were some weird items missing from my house, and my laptop was fried. It smelled as if someone had dumped soy sauce on it, and there did seem to be something sticky on the keys. There was no sign of a break-in. The things that were missing were small, but very special to me. Someone would have had to be inside my head to know what to take. I actually felt crazy about that one, wondering if I had somehow done it. Otherwise, how could someone know what to take? It was literally a tiny silver heart pendant that I wore nearly every day. It was put away, mixed in with other jewelry. Why would someone dig around and choose that? Why not grab all the jewelry? Also, I had just bought a bottle of lavender oil that day. It was in my medicine cabinet and that was gone. It was so random, but things that I had been handling and focusing on that day. I did a regression last year, and one of the things I wanted to touch upon were the missing dolls. Here's an excerpt from the journal entry I wrote about it. We went to where the dolls ended up. I saw what looked like a lining pocket from inside a suitcase. It was in a white room. I could see the dolls in there. Then I saw children in the play area. It wasn't a pretty place to play. Lots of dark gray or taupe. The floors had possibly a thin, dark carpeting. The walls were metal with thin gray rug over top. No ceiling. It seemed to be in a hangar. My dolls were there for all the kids to play with. The kids were all hybrid, it looked like, as was I. There were scooters, pogo sticks, tricycles, plastic wheelie toys, no decorations or pretty things. Just for clarification, I've never felt that I was hybrid or anything like that, but in that regression, I seemed to be hybrid when I was on the ship, but then human here on Earth. Anyone else experience missing items related to ET contact? Did you ever see the items again? I have this fantasy that all of my missing stuff is on a ship somewhere, and maybe one day I'll get it all back. I think those dolls are probably toast by now, given that they were shared amongst all the kids. I get why they would take toys, not sure why they'd take my clothing or that book. Perhaps they allowed me to take those things with me, and then they got left there. UFO Sighting in Nevada Desert by Beads is Green. This story takes place July 28, 2018. I told this story to a few friends or family, but most usually don't believe it, but it's hard to explain. I was driving from Ely, Nevada to Las Vegas, Nevada at roughly 3 a.m. I was in the car with my dad, driving in the middle of the desert in the middle of nowhere. I had seen a few jackrabbits on the side of the road, which had me on edge as I didn't want to hit one. Sure enough, one jumps out and I slightly swerve the wheel, unfortunately still hitting it. We were going 70 miles per hour. I pulled over while my dad was yelling at me for swerving and got out to check the damage and saw the most beautiful night sky I have ever seen. Probably one of the few places in the US with zero light pollution. The stars looked 10 feet above me. I will never forget this sight. We get back in the car and continue driving. I can't recall how much time had passed, but still shaken up, I was hyper-fixated on what was in front of me, as I didn't want to hit another animal. The bumper was damaged. Driving in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, out of nowhere, I see the entire sky light up a bright white light and beam into one point going the same direction I was heading. I asked my dad, who was half asleep, "Holy moly, did you see that?" He says he only saw a flash, and that was it. I have no idea what I saw that night, but I recall this story from 4 years ago so vividly and have experienced nothing like it before. I ask my dad about it every now and then, and he recalls the night and me being freaked out, but I am the only one who saw it. I have done research to see if there were any other sightings of anything that night in that area, and have found nothing. Was I the only person to see and experience this? I have no idea. This is what I saw and haven't told anyone outside my immediate relationships. Let me know if you have experienced or heard any stories like this, because I haven't. Sighting with Friends by Ride Dirt, Eat Tacos. I attended a Widespread Panic concert this past Saturday night with 6 friends, and after the show, we walked to M&N's Airbnb that they had rented for the weekend, about 1.5 miles from the venue. The house was about 2 blocks off the ocean. Earlier that day, while we were all hanging out at the beach, M&N both recounted stories to all of us from the night before, Friday, of very distant UFO sightings from their Airbnb while sitting in the backyard hot tub. They were super enthusiastic and very confident in their sightings, clearly not trying to fool us and genuinely awed at what they had seen the night before. After the show got out, we walked back from the venue to their Airbnb. Our group consisted of myself, P with his wife A1, K with his girlfriend A2, and the brothers previously mentioned M and N. I have known many of the people in the group for years, went to high school with 2 of them. Kay and I have been very close friends for over 20 years. We played darts for a while inside, then moved outside around what I'd estimate was 1:50 a.m. The first sighting occurred as I had just come back outside from using the restroom. As I was walking back outside, the group was incredibly ecstatic, yelling, pointing, etc. As I ran up, I had just missed what they were seeing by just a second or so due to the overhang of the roof over the outside area. They described what they saw as 2 or 3 lights zigzagging around very high up in the sky. I was genuinely bummed that I had missed it, but now I, along with others, were now completely fixated on watching the sky. About 5 minutes later is when I can honestly say was the craziest, wildest, most insane experience I've ever had throughout my 35 years of living. As we literally all had our heads looking toward the sky, a massive object came into view on our right side of vision and was no more than 2,000 to 3,000 feet away from us. A low-flying helicopter is the best height I can describe it at. It was not directly overhead, but I was at an angle with a clear view of its underbelly, and I roughly estimated its width to easily have been 1 to 2 football fields in width. Hard to say exactly how wide it was because it almost disappeared into the darkness the further away it got. It floated unbelievably effortlessly through the sky, no sound coming from it whatsoever. I could see its flat, dark, metal-type texture with a few flashing orange, red, white lights on its undercarriage. I remember clearly that it was large enough that the moonlight actually casted a shadow underneath the object. It cruised past us at about 30 miles per hour and was in sight for about 6 to 8 seconds before vanishing out of thin air, almost like it blended into a small cloud and vanished right into it, even though that cloud was much smaller than the object. No vapors left over behind it, gone just as the wind goes, absolutely silent. The object's shape was very almost like a mix of the Millennium Falcon and the Star Wars Star Destroyer, wide on the rear, narrower up front, very flat and smooth underneath. No one said a word when it appeared. It was dead silent, almost like all of us were gasping at what we were seeing before our very own eyes. M said he pulled out his phone and tried to take a picture, but was unable to get a shot of it with the amount of time it appeared along with the lighting conditions. I'm a professional videographer and photographer. The object was very dark from our viewpoint and far enough away that a camera phone would have an incredibly tough time capturing an image in that amount of darkness, plus distance, plus the little time to react and get a phone out was just not enough. I personally remember not even thinking to grab my phone because I was in such disbelief with what we were all witnessing. Conditions were clear, fingernail moon, 70-ish degrees out, lots of star visibility. K did not see the large object. He was inside the house when it appeared. I ran and yelled at him right after it happened to come outside. The best way I can describe what happened looking back was that it literally flew in, dropping thousands of feet per second to land right in our vision and then took back off. Afterwards, everyone was, what the best way I can describe it, mind blown. So many questions on what we had all just witnessed. I remember feeling very high on adrenaline, but then a few minutes after, an almost sense of fear came over myself and over the group. The girls were pretty shaken up, and they went inside for a few minutes. The guys were now outside sitting around the table, all admitting how scary that was, but we're also absolutely awed at the technology we had just seen, the length of it, how quiet it operated, how effortlessly it floated like a cloud in the sky. It vanished without skipping a beat. How you would imagine it to be done in the movies, except it was dead silent. Looking back, how quiet the object moved made it incredibly scary to be in sight of. We all agreed that something that quiet, that large, that obviously insanely powerful object flying like it did was chilling to the bone. Just recounting the story a day later gives me the chills. About 10 minutes after that, we saw two boomerang-shaped objects following each other closely across the sky. Very high altitude, but very visible, disappearing into the universe. After that, I started calling, texting friends, family that might be up. Almost felt the need to warn them or see if they were seeing anything in their areas. No one was up except my friend D, who answered in California, but was not really interested in hearing about it, which was understandable given the time and circumstances. Best way I justified why I called him is that I'm not going to randomly call you on Saturday night at 2 a.m. and tell you I saw a UFO if I didn't actually see a UFO. He agreed, said, be safe, call in the AM. I spoke to many friends the next morning, telling them what I am writing now. We watched the sky for about an hour longer after the large object sighting. Then we called an Uber back to Kay's family condo about 15 minutes away down the beach. P and I sat out on the porch when we got back and witnessed the light in the sky very far in the distance moving slowly towards the horizon, disappearing, then reappearing a little bit further down the path it was going. Went to bed around 4 a.m., nonstop thoughts racing on what we had seen. I hopped on Reddit to see if anyone else had seen stuff like this, Google, etc. Saw a few posts similar to what we had seen, but I didn't read about anything that close up. When we woke up in the morning, all our group could talk about was recounting what we had seen and how unimaginably crazy it was. Life-changing event without question. I always believed in them, but wow, this completely opened my eyes and was absolutely astonishing to see in person, to say the least. I told everyone in the morning to text me what they had witnessed so I can have it on record from a few different perspectives. I can post those as well once I get them all collected. I reached out to a local hotel that was in the line of sight. Their manager, after a little bit of explaining the situation, was willing to check their security cameras, but I think the hotel may have been located a bit too far to the north. I'm following up with them tomorrow. I also reached out to a local restaurant, but the manager was not having any of it really. and she said none of the cameras faced that direction, so I left it at that. I'm sure I will get some flack with non-believers and whatnot, which is to be expected. I'm posting this on Reddit to help others who do in fact recognize this phenomenon maybe better understand what is happening, or to possibly even gain insight into what my friends and I witnessed this past weekend. Cheers. In this next segment, we're looking at some of the most classic and well-known cases of encounters with the strange, including sightings of unidentified flying objects, alien abductions, ghost stories, cryptid encounters, and other unexplained phenomena. So, sit back and prepare to be taken on a journey through some of the most captivating and mysterious stories of the strange and unknown. In this episode, we take a look at the Crawfordsville Monster sighting of 1891. Famous encounters, the Crawfordsville Monster. In the early hours of Saturday, September 5th, 1891, two Crawfordsville ice delivery men, Marshall McIntyre and Bill Gray, were preparing their wagon for the morning rounds when they saw a white, shapeless apparition with several pairs of side fins measuring around 18 feet long and 8 feet wide, hovering in the sky above them. It moved rapidly, emitting a wheezing, plaintive sound that suggested it was in pain. The strange object resembled a shroud fitted with fins and flapped in the wind as it moved, giving an impression of unutterable agony. The ice delivery man watched the apparition hovering 300 or 400 feet above for nearly an hour before they retreated to the safety of the barn. The Crawfordsville Journal reported that the phenomenon did not appear to have a head or tail, but there was one great flaming eye that they could see. However, McIntyre and Gray were not the only people to witness a strange sighting that night. G.W. Switzer, the pastor of the First Methodist Church, saw the apparition shortly after midnight when he went to retrieve some water from the well outside his home. Switzer's wife joined him, and they watched as the white, writhing apparition seemed to swim through the air, twisting and turning as it glided, similar to the movement of some serpents. The mystery object was almost seen to descend on the lawn of the Lane place, the home of the late U.S. Senator Henry S. Lane's widow, before it rose and continued its circuitous route above the city. Switzer was a highly credible witness. When the news of the sighting reached the Crawfordsville residents, the eyewitnesses were ridiculed. Keeley's Institute for Inebriates in Plainfield even wrote to Reverend Switzer, inviting him to visit and seek a cure. Nevertheless, reports of the sightings generated a group of believers. The Indianapolis Journal and other newspapers across the country, including the Brooklyn Eagle, picked up the story, and the Crawfordsville postmaster received mail regarding the sighting. Some correspondents thought the sighting indicated that Judgment Day was near. A St. Louis woman wrote, asking if the apparition could be seen in the daytime, what color it was, and if it had been previously seen in Ohio. Two eyewitnesses, John Hornbeck and Abe Hernley, followed the creature about town and eventually discovered the so-called apparition was, in fact, a flock of many hundred killdeer. The many birds' wings, white underfeathers, and plaintive cries added to the belief of many eyewitnesses that the creature had come from another world. Low visibility due to damp air likely compounded the misidentification. The Crawfordsville Journal hypothesized that the town's newly installed electric lights caused the birds to become disorientated, hovering and wreathing their way above the city. If this explanation does not satisfy, there is an alternative one. During the previous week, newspapers circulated another story from Crawfordsville about a balloon parachute craze taking hold among the town's boys. That would explain the billowing she-like apparition, but it does not account for the wheezing plaintive sound emitting from the aerial monster. The same report about the parachute craze mentioned that the boys also like to send cats up in their balloons. Could this have been what McIntyre, Gray, and the Switzers saw and heard instead? 40 years later, the monster was revived by a man infamous for not letting facts get in the way of a good story. In his 1931 book, intriguingly titled Low, Charles Fort laid out an incredibly brief version of the story as he had found it reported in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle of September 10, 1891. Something that was seen at Crawfordsville, Indiana, 2 a.m. September 5th. 2 Icemen saw it. It was a seemingly headless monster, or it was a construction, about 20 feet long and 8 feet wide, moving in the sky, seemingly propelled by fin-like attachments. It moved toward the Iceman. The Iceman moved. It sailed away and made such a noise that the Reverend G.W. Switzer, pastor of the Methodist Church, was awakened and looking from his window saw the object circling in the sky. Fort then spent a longer amount of space explaining how he had not only confirmed that a man named Reverend G.W. Switzer had indeed lived in Crawfordsville at the time, but that he had contacted Switzer, who had then promised to write back with a full accounting of the matter. But at the time of writing Low, Fort tells us he had still been unable to get that response from Switzer, so Fort speculated that it might be because Switzer had a last-minute panic about admitting he'd seen a monster in a new print publication. Fort then also stressed the importance of the fact he confirmed Switzer was real, which stood in as his implied proof that the tale of the Crawfordsville Monster must, therefore, also be true. The complete story of the Crawfordsville Monster, as reported by the Crawfordsville Journal in early September 1891, is perhaps an anticlimax to modern readers. However, it is disappointing for cryptozoologists and ufologists alike. Thanks for watching another episode of Strange Encounters. We hope you enjoyed hearing about the mysterious and unexplained stories that we shared today. If you haven't already, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll never miss out on any of our future episodes, and you'll help us continue to bring you more fascinating stories and encounters. We'd love to hear from our viewers, so send your own experiences with the unknown to our email at verystrangeEncounters.com. You can also submit your stories to the website linked below. You can join us on Reddit at r/verystrangeEncounters. If you enjoyed the video and would like to support us, join our Patreon page or go to buymeacoffee.com, both of which are linked in the video description and in the pinned comment below. Your support really helps this channel continue to bring you new and amazing stories. This week's Patron of the Week is Crazy Lazy. Thanks so much for all your support. Thank you again for tuning into Strange Encounters. We appreciate the support of everyone who listens to the channel. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and keep looking up.